Blackbird singing in the dead of night. Take these broken wings and learn to fly. All your life you were only waiting for this moment to arise. Blackbird singing in the dead of night. Take these sunken eyes and learn to see. All your life you were only waiting for this moment to be free. Blackbird fly, blackbird fly into the light of a pale dark night. Blackbird fly, blackbird fly into the light of a pale dark night. Now, just when you think it's over, hit it again, Joe. Singing in the dead of night. Take these broken wings and learn to fly. All your life you were only waiting for this moment to arise. You were only waiting for this moment to arise. You were only waiting so you could learn to fly. Alrighty. Are you going to introduce our lovely guest? You come up here, new girlfriend.
Oh, I'm looking so forward to hearing you, Janell. Welcome.
Well, what I was trying to remember, why I wanted you to do it, was the name of her talk.
I don't remember.
Spirituality and longevity.
There you go.
Yeah.
Spirituality and longevity. They go hand in hand.
Yes, they do. They do. All right. Does this sound okay?
Yeah.
All right. Awesome. Well, I want to just say that it is always a pleasure to be here, and that I think, you know, everyone here has pretty much got something down, which is the spirituality part, and which will help with our longevity in general. So today, you know, I'm going to talk about, you know, something that tends to be kind of missing in the in health span. And so, you know, whenever we talk about lifespan and health span, they are not equal. Health span is how well we're living at the moment, whereas lifespan is how long we live. That's a chronological number. We all have a finite time and everything. So, you know, whenever we're talking about health span, we're talking about living well. And so, I would like to argue that, and maybe not argue, I think a lot of you guys might agree that spirituality and longevity are two sides of the same coin. And that, you know, if you look at the studies and everything, that those who have a spiritual connection, no matter how it is, and remember, atheists can be very spiritual also, that they tend to live longer and have a better life, and they bounce back better. So, you know, I can stand up here and I can talk to you about what I do on a day-to-day basis as far as being a longevity physician. I mean, we measure what, you know, VO2 max, how well your cardiorespiratory is working. We measure insulin sensitivity and metabolic flexibility and markers and everything. We track inflammation. Really and truly, aging is inflammation. That's truly what it is, without a doubt. And I think eventually there'll be a new, it'll be inflammatology, and we'll add another ology. And so we look at how well we sleep. That's exceedingly important. And then, some of the down to the molecular and DNA level, telomere length, we can calculate your biological age, and risk scores and everything. And so, and let's be clear, all of that matters. I mean, it's important. We truly are what we, eat and exercise. Those lifestyle modifications, we will never, ever be able to be without. And so, so those things are exceedingly important, but the one missing thing that, you may not always hear about is spirituality and connection and purpose. And I loved hearing the readings today, because it's like the readings were about meaning and purpose. And that's what helps us all get through this life. And so, as we go through this thing called life, we all experience stress. Sometimes, we get emotionally disconnected and fatigued and unfulfilled and everything. And if we think about how we evolved as humans, I mean, when we get stressed, our cortisol levels go up, we survive the big tiger attack, and then cortisol levels go back to normal and we're fine. But in today's society, it's not that way. In today's society, we have the chronic stress. And I think most of us remember a time when it was so much simpler, when we didn't have all the internet, and now we have social media, and it causes a lot of isolation. I myself have cut back on social media because I didn't feel like it was helping to fulfill me as an individual. I am grateful to it because Facebook is how I met Carrie, and Carrie's how I met everyone here. So we have to remember, some of those things, their places and everything. So, so I'd already mentioned one of the things that's missing. A lot of times whenever we're talking about longevity is meaning. What is the meaning of your life? What gives you purpose? Why do you get up in the morning and everything? It's not about being optimistic all the time, Pollyannish, that sort of thing. It's not about positivity. And it's not about a particular belief system. Meaning is where spirituality enters the longevity conversation. So we have to have meaning. We talk about, all of us wanting to get to retirement and to live in our golden years, but we have to retire to something. And, we have to figure out some other type of something that brings us fulfillment and meaning in our life when we retire. I mean, I've had many of patients who have, been looking to retire, and then they retire, and 2 months later they're dead because, they didn't have something to retire to. And so, so that's exceedingly important. Spirituality. A lot of times it's often misunderstood. I don't know how you guys feel, but sometimes I feel like we, are misunderstood. I mean, because we don't always, we're not into the dogma of doctrine. We are not, spirituality is not something supernatural. And it's also not a substitute for medicine, but the other thing spirituality is it's not a religion. You can be spiritual and not religious, and that's kind of how I see myself. And so, Spirituality, it's about connection. It's about connection to something other than ourselves. Whether that is with our group, our friend group, whether it's with our family, whether it's with Mother Nature, at its core, that's what spirituality is connection. And we all feel better, and we all are looking for that connection. We look for purpose, we look, connection is about values. Connection to ourself. I mean, the one thing that I have tried to do over the last 5 years, 4 to 5 years, is being authentic to myself. I mean, I know for, 30 years, it was all about pleasing whoever. And, I know over the last 5 years, I have figured out, myself and being authentic to myself. And, I don't really care that much what others think. I mean, I do some. I mean, that's not, I think we all do. But, I have found a connection to myself. And how I have found it is through spirituality and embracing, a lot of times I'll say quirkiness, these are the quirkiness of me. I like to do astrology. I like to do tarot cards. I like to do Reiki. And, those are things that help me to connect to myself. And so, we're always looking for connection to something larger than our own individual stories. And spirituality answers questions that medicine does not. In medicine, we traditionally don't ask those questions. Whenever I was doing straight primary care and I was in brick and mortar and I was seeing patients, the one thing that I would always mention to them is, what's going on up here? Because, if we're not right up here, it doesn't matter what I do, I'm not going to get you physically well. And that the mind is the most powerful organ that you have to be able to heal yourself. And so, I may have mentioned it at some point in time, but whenever I got into medical school, a close friend of mine gave me a book called Love, Medicine, and Miracles by Bernie Siegel. And, he was talking about, he was a oncology surgeon, and he talked about the importance of purpose for his patients who were very, very, very ill. And that's also where I learned, because, in medicine, we're always talking about, statistics show this, show that. And, you go and you're going to have a surgery and the surgeon says, well, this is my, rate of, bad outcomes or what have you. And it's kind of like, or this is what the hospital's rate is. And my thought is that, well, that's all well and good, but when it's myself and when it's my loved one, it's 100%. And so the statistics do not matter in that sense. The other thing, with that book, I learned that, in oncology, we talk about, the 5-year survival rate or the 10-year survival rate and everything. And so, and even if you have, a horrendous, like pancreatic cancer or something like that, there is a 5-year survival rate, and your goal is to be in that survival rate. So, if it's 2%, your goal is to be in that 2%. And so that's where I learned how important, our mind and what we believe and what we think truly matters. Because if you're, studies have consistently shown, if you're depressed, sad, over and over and over again, that you don't have good outcomes. It's a lot of reason why a lot of times you've had a heart attack. One of the things they'll do is they'll put you on an antidepressant. I'm not saying that's the best way to go about it. I myself would rather do some spiritual looking at myself and everything, but that is something that modern medicine will do. Some of the things that, we should be asking ourselves, why am I here? I'm sure all of us at some point in time have thought, well, what's going on? Why am I here? What matters to me? And how well do I relate to change? I mean, let's face it, life is about change. I mean, it is all about change. How well do I relate to loss? I mean, we've all experienced loss at some point in time. How well do I relate to uncertainty? I mean, there's been a lot of uncertainty in these times and everything. And by having that spiritual connection, that can help us with change, that can help us with loss, and that can help us with uncertainty. What makes my life feel better? What's important to me? That is so important to think about. The one thing that I will say, you'll hear me say at work, is like, we're all replaceable. We're all replaceable at work. I mean, but we are not replaceable to our loved ones. And so a lot of times we have to think about what our priorities are and everything. The other thing I want you to think about is that spirituality helps to regulate our system. We talk about the parasympathetic and the sympathetic system. The parasympathetic, I'm sure we all have experienced it right after Thanksgiving. We wanted to do the rest and digest. That is the parasympathetic. The sympathetic is whenever that tiger is chasing you and our cortisol levels and adrenaline and everything's going up. Spirituality helps to regulate that. I mean, because sometimes we need that boost, when the tiger's chasing us. But spirituality helps us to bring all of that stress back down to a baseline, to where our body can rest and heal itself. And so, it also, whenever we get into that rest and digest, when we calm our nervous system, this is why meditation and everything is so important, that it helps our immune system. It helps our immune system to function better. That was one thing that Dr. Bernie Siegel would have his patients do. He would have his patients to meditate and think about their white blood cells. I mean, because we make cancer cells every single day. And whenever our cancer cells are, whenever they get a good hold, is whenever our immune system is not able to take them out. So Dr. Bernie Siegel would have his patients to meditate and think about their white blood cells, however you wanted to look, going around, as I think one of them was like a Star Wars, that, his white blood cell was a Star Trooper, and they would go and fire and take out the bad guys, which is the cancer cells. And so, meaning, spirituality, meaning, it changes our physiology. And so, I know that everyone that's here has some sort of spiritual connection, and that is exceedingly important, and that's what's going to help you go beyond and out, I hate to say it outlive, but it is outlive, your friends, your colleagues, because you have to have something that you're connected to. So, as I've mentioned, the things like meditation, spirituality, it helps to lower your baseline cortisol, and the inflammation. Already talked about autonomic balance. With spirituality, you have lower rates of depression. Already mentioned, cardiovascular disease and how depression is bad for that. And spirituality overall, there are studies out there that consistently show that if you are spiritual, and it doesn't matter how, that there's a lower rate of mortality, and you are much more likely to bounce back. Let's see. Longevity, I already mentioned it's about capacity and how well we are living. We can keep you alive a long time, but how well is that life? And so, longevity, aka health span, very, very different than lifespan. So, spirituality, if you didn't gather, it helps us adapt to changes. It helps us to recover from stress, illness, loss. It also helps us to remain curious, because I feel like everybody in here, you're curious. You want to know. You want to learn. And that is so important as we, live longer and everything, is to have a sense of curiosity, to be engaged and to be emotionally flexible, as we age and everything. So, the other thing, spiritual practice, it helps to train our nervous system. We mentioned meditation, we've mentioned prayer, contemplative reflection. I do that a lot, every single morning. Used to, I would be laying in bed and I would think, oh, what am I going to eat for breakfast? Now I think about, what is my day going to be like? And so, gratitude practices. I like to write. I don't do it as much, I can tell when things are really good. I don't necessarily do it as much. When things are not as good, I always like to write what my gratitudes are. Because even if life is hitting the fan, we can always be grateful for something in our life. And so we just have to find what that is. So gratitude is exceedingly important. I usually try to write down 3 things that I'm grateful for. And, and it changes. I will say usually at number 1 is I'm grateful for my sons. And so, gratitude practice, time in nature. I think that is so exceedingly important. You can do a walking meditation as you are hiking through nature. And I've always done this. As soon as my mom would let me leave the yard, I was out in the mountains or the hills of West Virginia, and with my reliable sidekick dog, just hiking through the mountains all the time. And and I learned during that, how to be reflective and everything. Breath work. We've already done that here today. That is exceedingly important, is breath work. Ritual and rhythm. There's a ritual here. We join, at 10:30 and everything. So rituals are important. And so what matters is not the form, but the function. These practices, they teach our nervous system how to regulate itself, how to, emotionally regulate, how to regulate our body and everything. So these practices increase our tolerance to that uncertainty that I've mentioned, reduces reactivity, and expands our emotional range without collapse. I know that I myself, whenever I'm having something has got me really upset, usually, sometimes I want to talk about it, sometimes I don't, but if I'm really upset, what helps me regulate my system is whenever I get a hug from somebody. So, look and think, what helps me, regulate my system? What calms down that sympathetic system and helps you get into the rest and digest? And so, because, you want to help to increase that, what we call the parasympathetic tone, rest and digest. You know, and that helps, you know, reduce our inflammatory signals. Studies have shown, I can go over the inflammatory markers that we look at, but studies have shown that, you know, meditation, having a spiritual connection and everything helps to decrease these inflammatory markers. And so, you know, the other thing we usually, I don't know if you've heard about, but heart rate variability, that's kind of important. That kind of shows how well your heart can recover and everything. So those practices help with that as well. And it also supports your immune surveillance so that your white blood cells, your immune system can be looking for the things that are, you know, abnormal. I mean, I feel kind of bad for our immune system because when we were developing as humans and everything, I mean, you know, infection bad, inflammation good. Well, now it's not so much that way. Infection's still bad, but you can have too much inflammation, and that's what happens with chronic stress. You know, so these practices, they help to shift us out of the fight or flight mode that a lot of us get into, and what happens with today's society. And I feel for these kids because they, you know, the boys all game. I don't know what girls do because I don't have any girls, and so maybe you guys could tell me. But, you know, they all get locked in and on their computer, and they miss that human connection and that human contact. I mean, my cousin and I, we, you know, have sons, and our sons are, you know, close to the same age, and she's like, yeah, I'm always telling mine, you're never going to meet a girl up there in your room gaming, so you got to get out, you got to connect, and I couldn't agree with her more. And so, we can't heal if we're in a constant state of threat, so that's exceedingly important that we get that down. You know, I already talked about aging, you know, and as we get older, you know, our identity changes, our body changes, you know, and so remember, if you're not retired, you know, look for something to retire to. And, you know, also as we get older, you know, our loved ones, wanting to help and take care of our loved ones, I mean, but it's also a stressor too. So, you know, if you're feeling overwhelmed, it's important that you reach out and connect. And so, let's see. And I think we went over all of that. Yeah, we did all of that. The other thing that spirituality can help with is it can actually, I mean, it can help with traditional medicine too. And, you know, being able to be like, okay, I'm going to do this. The doctor said to do this, so I'm going to eat better. And my grandfather, when he was a moonshiner, my grandfather, this is my dad's side, and lived in Tennessee, and he would always drink moonshine. He was a moonshiner, made his own moonshine and everything. Also a tobacco grower, and you know, would cure his own tobacco and smoke his own. Well, I think there towards the end he was smoking Pall Malls. But the doctor, his liver enzymes were bad, and he had said, JL, can you at least not drink the hard stuff? And my grandfather was like, okay, so, I mean, and he goes back and he's like, well, if I can't drink the good stuff, I won't drink at all. So he just put his last mason jar on the shelf and said, if I want it, I can have it. But, and, you know, this isn't about spirituality. This is just a fun story about my grandfather. But, you know, I can relate to him because that's kind of how I quit smoking the first time. The second time I quit smoking, that's a different story. And so, but the first time I kept telling myself, oh, if I want that cigarette, I can have that cigarette. And so, and let's see, it's a lot of repeat. And so anyway, I want to leave you guys with this thought about longevity and spirituality. You know, longevity is not about avoiding death. It's about staying alive to your life, who you are, and it is also about, you know, connection, purpose, meaning. Those are all so exceedingly important for us as we live our lives and everything. So, all right. Anybody have any? I may have done it too quick, but, you know, anybody have any questions?
So what about your second time quiz?
Oh, the second time? Well, this is what happened. I was in residency. Well, I'll tell you how I started back smoking. It was kind of silly. I was in medical school. I was a second-year medical student, and we were doing pharmacology. And I learned that nicotine increases your, you know, concentration and everything, and it kind of curbs that appetite. And I was like, oh, well, I went cold turkey the first time. I'll just, you know, pick up smoking at night while I study, and then when I'm done, I will quit. And, well, no, it did not work out that way. I mean, it took me like 5 years to quit. I mean, I tried everything. And then what really did it was I got a new roommate who didn't smoke. And I went on Wellbutrin, I'll be honest, also known as, back then it was known as Zyban, which curbed my nicotine craving, and I started mountain biking all within a week. And it was like, the first time I went mountain biking, I was like, I can't breathe, oh my God. So it kind of reinforced the not smoking, but, and that was on, my last cigarette was June 6, 1998. So, but yeah, that's how I quit the second time. Mm-hmm. Any other questions?
Mountain biking.
Mountain biking, you know, that's how I did it. Not everybody does it that way, so. And I will be honest, nicotine's one of the best drugs out there. When you're up, it brings you down. When you're down, it brings you up. So I can always relate to a patient's struggle to quit smoking because it's not easy. But I will also say where there's a will, there's a way. Ex-smokers are kind of the worst because we know what it's like to, you know, to quit it. And I just look at myself as a recovering nicotine addict. I mean, you know, we have recovering drug addicts, we have recovering alcoholics. I'm a recovering nicotine addict. So.
Nicotine a drug?
Huh?
Is it nicotine a drug?
It is a drug, yes. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. And so,
Sure.
I will also tell you something that's I have a friend in North Carolina who is a Lakota Indian, and she grows her, or Native American indigenous person, she grows her own tobacco in her backyard, and I can go and smoke her chanupa, aka peace pipe, and it doesn't trigger my nicotine cravings, and it's because it came out of her. It's because she grew and it's not been, you know, tainted and chemically modified to where it crosses the blood-brain barrier so quickly. And so, but yeah, any other questions?
You were talking about retirement, and it seems to me, I'm retired, it seems to me everybody I know who's retired is busier than when they were working.
That is a good thing. Mm-hmm. Yes.
And we always laugh at people who say, well, when I retire, I'll have all this free time.
No, not at all. I mean, so, you know, your friends and family who have retired, they've obviously retired to something.
Yes.
So, and that's what is exceedingly important. You got to retire to something. So, and I'm not retired, obviously, but I think about, Carlos and I think about when we retire, what we're going to do, and, you know, I'm kind of I'm into the animal welfare, he's into the elderly welfare, so I'm sure we'll figure out something, so. Mm-hmm. Anything else? Well, I will hand it back over to you.